Okay, so now you understand the advanced momentum cycle. Now let's continue with the advanced basic cycle, but again, this is all part of the cycle advanced, and really but let's really conclude our full understanding of fractals. So let me move this over to the left, and beautiful. Entry cycle E. Here is our entry cycle. This is what it looks like. Our entry cycles are always going to represent kind of the same thing, but they might create different kind of opportunities. It's going to be very important because this is going to segue into advanced entries in terms of understanding how entries can actually present. So again, same exact thing. On this time frame, all of a sudden, we see something as a major flush. Notice that there's no crazy labels or anything inside of there for the accumulation MB. Notice it's the same price. Notice it's the same diagram as this, but all of a sudden, because we're no longer on a momentum cycle, the V or C, and because we're on the E, we are considering the labeling or the price that is happening a little bit differently. Because remember, there is a separation behind all the analysis that happens on those hires and the analysis from the actual entry. Because analysis does not always lead to entry, right? A small portion of the time, analysis starts to play out, and then analysis leads to actual entry because everything is in line. And the way that I'm teaching you to label, or the way that I personally think and the way that I label, is a way that allows me to basically separate that the fact that I'm doing analysis and then I'm doing entries. And in the event that I then take an entry or I'm looking for an entry, the way I'm thinking about the concept for an entry is very different from the way I'm thinking about the cycle that's delivering for momentum. So as we go over here, right, that same action, all of a sudden we're not looking at this as like okay, where's the perfect accumulation MB? Instead, we look at that as the major flush. That is the thing that would have been the major flush that would be happening inside of like here, right? So again, very important, think fractally. This move here on a lower time frame is this move here. You got that? Good. Okay, there we go. So you have a major flush. Fantastic. That major flush might put you and throw you into a stage 2. That stage 2, notice, I'm using the same diagram, guys, has momentum MBs. It has all that stuff, but we're not labeling that. We're not interested in that. That's not what I'm necessarily trading unless you've decided for yourself that you're trading the momentum MBs instantly. Okay? Major flush into stage 2. You've already learned this. Then a flush comes in. And the flush does what? It pushes you below potentially the 1020 or to the 10 and 20. And what does that do? It begins to create accumulation MBs in the way that you've learned them already in the portal. And that could lead to entries, right? Now, those entries could become break-evens, could be managed break-evens, could be potential losses, could be managed losses, so maybe a smaller loss than a full risk loss. I don't know. That's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking specifically about just the labeling of understanding how prices work. Stage 2, price goes into a flush. When price goes into a flush, what is that on a higher time frame? That's an MMB1. Now, I wouldn't label it because it's already labeled from the momentum cycle you're on, but that's that momentum MB. Because remember, this pullback, this flush is doing what? It's coming to or just under a 5, and then it's running on a rising 10, rising 20. That's what's happening on that higher time frame. This is that fractal I discussed. That momentum MB1 might look like the accumulation MB, like I've spoken about before, of that higher time frame, because again, think about it, right? That might be happening MB1, maybe MB2, but that's already the momentum MB. And now on a lower time frame, that's where the cycle is playing out. So you have a flush, they begin to build up accumulation MBs. Sometimes it leads to a deeper flush, and maybe another little flush, starts building accumulation MBs that can act as opportunities at or around this 10 and 20, right? Or even within MBs, what happens? We can sometimes build up other MBs, and those start to move higher. And then you have momentum MBs, which for some of you might act as entries, and those start to move higher. And then you might get a flush, another one that comes down to the 10/20 or just to the 10 and 20. This is important because this is still a flush because we are part of the entry cycle now, right? And that flush might still be, remember, on a higher time frame, might still be part of this momentum MB1 because on the higher time frame, what does this flush look like? Maybe something like this, right? Could be something as simple as that. Just a simple little flush, right? Nothing wrong with that. Sorry. It could be this guy right here. right? Which could still be an MMB1, which is exactly what I was going for with this drawing, and I'll show you why in a second. But so we have that build up, okay? So that flush occurs. Great. And you maybe get involved on the accumulation MBs within that flush, because those are going to be the characteristics of that happening. And maybe even on the momentum MBs based on your rules or based on what's happening. Now you get in, it goes, it starts flushing again, and all of a sudden, it flushes deeper and actually takes out any position you might have been in. But guess what? Despite it being lower than where you might have bought it, despite it coming down here, that flush might be nothing more. Remember this drawing right here? That's that flush right there. That's what's happening. This is the fractals of price. This is how they interact with each other. So that flush that's now happening where you might have traded here for your flush on the entry cycle because you're like, okay, it's part of the MMB1. I can get behind this. It's right at the 5. I can take this higher. And then it does this. Well, it's actually still just building this momentum cycle. And this flush is just coming to take you out here. Or on a prior trade you might have taken here, maybe it takes you out just by a little bit and then sets up new moves. Very important to remember that. And once, keep watching. This is going to get really, really good for you guys in a second. But let me get rid of all of that. Don't need those in the way. Cool. Okay, so it flushes out. And what does it do? It starts building accumulation MBs. And again, they're not always going to be perfect the way they're going to be built, the way they're going to happen. You get new accumulation MBs. Sometimes this accumulation MB here, as it gets built, might have its own accumulation MBs within it that you then choose to trade, right? Then it moves higher. Then it flushes again. But this time the flush just comes to the 10/20, just under the 10 to the 20, and starts building accumulation MBs or momentum MBs that act as opportunities for you to go higher. And all of a sudden, you're in the MMB2 of a potential move. Price moves higher, right? Starts to flush, builds accumulation MBs, and you're doing that for the potential of a move. That's your whole thing. You've already learned this. You already know this. This is from the other diagram. It's just made clearer. Again, you can take a screenshot on your phone or something. I'll try to put this together into some area so you can have it if you want to just print it out or something. But you've already learned this. With just forgetting these green labels above, just forget about those green labels for a second. You've already learned this. Major flush, stage 1, stage 2, flush to those averages because you've already learned how an entry cycle will flush to or just below the averages, build up accumulation MBs, move higher. Flush, build up accumulation MBs, move higher. Sometimes flush, because the flush is actually here for the new stage 1, build accumulation MBs, move higher. Flush, accumulation MBs, move higher. Now, what's really cool about all of this is it's all happening because remember, you basically just learned a momentum cycle, which is like this thing here. You've already learned that as the momentum cycle. You already know that it's a momentum cycle. But now all of a sudden, when we're thinking about it on the E, it's different regarding what we might want to be trading or where we're looking for entries, right? And all of a sudden, what's really cool about this, this is like the magical moment, right? Is pay attention now to these green things, MMB1 and MMB2. In this entire time, all we've done with this move is we've covered this piece of price from this overall, right here, from this overall momentum cycle. We covered that amount of price right there, basically. All right, so if I move back over here, that's all we've covered. Think about it, okay? You had that initial flush, major flush. That was the area right here before it became a big accumulation MB. But remember, it was this tiny area here because this is what it created, boom. Then prices moved higher. That would be a move, let me trace it, right? I mean, let's do it in orange and make it really large. Prices moved higher, sideways, higher, sideways, higher. That was price being around here on this, right? Because we're thinking in fractals. Price moved all the way up here. Price moved all the way up here. That's this leg right here. As it starts making that momentum MB, that's this overall flush and the buildup of accumulation MBs into the momentum MBs that create the potential cycle for entries. Then price moves higher. As price moves higher, price moves higher. This is where it moves to. Then price flushes again or pauses again right there. You know what that pause is? That's this area right here. That's that pause. And from there, starts a move. And we might think that momentum MB1 might lead to a big move like this, like this, but it doesn't. Instead, what happens? Price actually goes for a deeper pullback, but still around this same area, deeper pullback, but around this same area, hence the drawing of the red, and then hence why I drew this thing earlier for you guys to see that this, even though it might be far separated, is still part of that momentum MB move, because it's part of that momentum cycle, right? And you get that flush, you get that flush, you get that flush, and you get that move, you get that move, and you get this mini pause that might just hit the 5, and that might be this nice flush that provides new opportunity, and then starts to move higher. And guess what? In our example, if you had taken this trade right here, which would be a trade, sorry, if you had taken this trade right here, which would have been a trade right there, what would that mean for us? Well, that's what it would mean. That would mean you have gotten yourself successfully positioned for a very nice momentum MB follow through of a higher time frame cycle, because you're entering here, even though it might have looked like this, right? Not perfect, nothing crazy, or looked like it might be extended, or looked like the market had trended for too long. Well, guess what? You're part of that cycle. This is where you actually got in. That's it. That's where you got in. Price never returned because demand truly validated. Welcome back to the beginning of the course. Demand truly validated. Price doesn't need to come back. Price plays out its cycle, and you get to make money. So this whole thing here is simply represented as this right here. Now, it might be hard to gauge that because you saw this already as part of the momentum cycle, but now I'm teaching you to look at it as the entry cycle, because guess what? There is nothing new about any time frame you use. Like I said, it doesn't matter what time frame you're trading on. Well, it does for certain reasons, but all assets, all time frames, it's the same movement. It's the same understanding. It's just different in terms of how you're operating for entries. And now to really demonstrate this, right, if we think about this actual move here in terms of how it provided entries, how there might have been more entries that might have gotten taken out to create other entries, let's go back to the same examples we've seen and just walk us through it. Have we seen the same thing on MSTR? Well, we just spoke about this in terms of the momentum cycle in the last video. There it is. Let's cut it back similarly to just around where, let's cut this back to just around where this cycle right here is, around the MMB2 or just a little bit higher, okay? So around the MMB2 or just a little bit higher, so somewhere like here, right? We can cut it. Do we see the same kind of cycle as we move to a 65-minute, which would be the entry in reference to this exact momentum cycle? So again, what is this similar to? Similar to that right there. It doesn't work. What is this similar to? This whole thing right here is this shot right here. That's it, right? It comes out of the accumulation MB, so that's to the left, right? Created that accumulation MB out of the stage 1, moved higher, MMB1. Here's your MMB1. Moves higher, in this case MMB2, or pauses, kind of like this, right? Moves higher, MMB2. This could be an MMB2, sure. Comes down, comes higher, pauses. Now again, not perfect. This is not, remember, trading is a snowflake in terms of, it's different always how it delivers, but this is the general way. That's why I drew it this way, to show you that it can be on the 5, the 10, the 20. There's multiple ways, and they could be paused different places. This could have paused earlier. This could have paused maybe a little bit higher. Then this could have paused just higher to it, which might have taken you out of this trade because this one came down. Whatever it might be, it's not perfect. I need you to know this because it's very important, because most people think they're going to find perfection and they never make it in trading. The second you understand this, you're set. So again, this here is the same as this here in terms of where we are cyclically. So what does that mean? That means when we go lower, what we should see is this, all of this, just inside of this action. Let's jump to our entry time frame. Let's see if we can redraw that, mapping it with the different way of thinking in terms of typing out the things like I taught you to type. So where's the major flush? There it is, right? The major flush is made up of those accumulation MBs. Here you are. This whole thing here was the major flush. You could even consider this as part of the major flush because remember, I'm also labeling that the accumulation MB, but ultimately this is the major flush. Then price does what? It starts to stage 2. Here's your stage 2. That in itself is the stage 2. The stage 2 comes out of this market. The money comes in. That is actually made up of, guess what? This is where the fractals I taught you about came from. That's made up of its own accumulation MBs, momentum MB, momentum MB, momentum MB, momentum MB, momentum MB, failure, distribution, play around, come out of that stage 1, momentum MB, move higher. That's made up of the same thing. That was that same screenshot, but now we're looking at this inside of the V. So we're labeling it via the entry cycle. So now we have a major flush that created that higher time frame accumulation MB. This is how we think in time frames now, because we know these accumulation MBs created this flush on this time frame. Prices moved into a stage 2. Then what happened? Price sold off into the 1020 or below the 1020. As part of that MMB1, there's that flush. And what did it do? It built up accumulation MBs. Those are those MBs right there. And guess what that did? That created a potential, for some of you, opportunity. And for me, as I'm looking at this, because of the strength that comes in, this trade, as it comes back, is already a break even, which means I lose nothing, 0, on this trade, despite the analysis and the entry not being correct. So notice how the analysis was now correct and started to play out. And because of that, I then got an entry. And then after getting the entry, I still didn't lose money. So not only can my analysis be wrong and I won't lose money, but my analysis can be wrong. I can take an entry and I can still not lose money. Hopefully, parts of this are starting to show you why this thought process in this entire space that you need to be correct about the things you're doing is complete bullshit. You know, if you've made it this far in the portal, which many of you hopefully have because you're actually here and you're watching this and you're putting in the work, guess what? You just learned something that close to most traders will never understand for themselves. Cool. It reflushes deeper. And what does it do? Creates an accumulation MB, double MB, that connects as momentum MB or accumulation MB, momentum MB, all within that overall flush. These are all acting as opportunities for an entry, all of which get broken even very quickly and never come back because they are true demand validations, true MB validations, and never come back. Hence why I manage the way I do. Great. Those ended up perfectly. And guess what? Those here are these ones right there. Also, I don't know if you saw, but major flush right here. That's your major flush. Stage 2 right here, all the way up into the higher time frame MMB1 formation. This whole thing here is stage 2. Beautiful. Flush, well, now we know how to label it. Flush. Accumulation MBs for potential entry or momentum MBs after that. There they are. Price moves higher. What happens? Price moves higher and it might go through another flush. What happens here? Price moves higher and it goes through another flush. That flush might lead to some kind of entries. You know, in this case, I don't really see them. But let's just say for some reason you took one of these entries or one of these entries. You know, I would not take this, but let's say you did. Again, this would be a break-even trade because power comes in. Then what happens? Price flushes deeper. Price flushes deeper. Now at this point, because of this market specifically, we're at MMB2. So we've reached MMB2, but we can also, you know, kind of look at it this way. We've reached this MMB2 and then it flushes out. That flush out does what? It leads to either you're looking at this and you don't really take it, or you take something here and then you break even on it, so you don't take any loss, but you know, it's just preference. Or you were looking at something like this, right? And you end up taking this opportunity right here. And then I think I labeled, yeah, this thing was my MMB2. So you take something like this right here. Great. Right, you get in, you move to break even, maybe it starts moving and you actually get a partial out of this thing. Maybe you take some out of this position up here before it rolls over. I'm going to move this back up here, right? So now you're in that MMB2 and that's delivering. Great, phenomenal, right? And then I think this comes back. No, it doesn't. Okay, that's fine, but then that's MMB3 and it's no longer important. But notice this. There you are. In that move, inside of that MMB1, MMB2, just that, where we're expecting an entry cycle to be playing out, and it needs to be playing out well because we're looking for good moves. Because remember, We are here to know what the constant operator is doing, which means we're looking for assets, we're looking for tradable things, right, that are meeting clear moves, that are doing this cleanly. There's no reason to sit around and trade shit. Remember that. Here's that cycle. That's that cycle happening. Sometimes the cycle, based on where you trade it, comes back before giving new opportunities, even though you might be wrong. But even when it does that, you take no loss, right? Like this one right here. This was a great example right here, right? Where this double MB happened, but you took no loss on it, right? Because you broke even or you manage your position. Then it moves higher. And again, here's another great example. If you for some reason saw this as a flush, you took maybe this, something like this, and you're like, I'm happy with this trade. I like where it's happening. I'm just going to take it. Well, you would have gotten broken even here. I would have gotten broken even here. But let's say you didn't, and let's say you held it for longer. You might get broken even here as it comes back. But as it comes back, what does it do? It's still part of the flush. So this is the example that you see here, where price flushed out, created the opportunities, then came back to kind of take that area out and create new opportunities. That's exactly what happened right here in reference to this. Price flushed out to then recreate new opportunities. And again, you have accumulation MB. Maybe you entered here or you entered through this because of where we are in the momentum MB. You take that, same thing goes. Now you're behind that move. Yep, would have held itself perfectly, and off you go. And then price goes. Now it's in the momentum MB4, forms that, goes. So again, this whole thing here now is showing more than what this is showing, right? Because this is like to scale. This is what actual price will do on your entry cycle on the clear markets that you've learned to trade. Now, what's beautiful is we continue saying this thing like clear markets, clean markets. Part of that is seeing already how I'm looking at a lot of markets that have these clean EBCs that, you know, just line up and are perfect and everything makes sense and I want to trade them and I want to take my risk on them. But as I say this clean market thing, clear market thing, it's because I'm going to show you how to use the exact tools that you already have access to. No other payment, nothing like that. And you can use them right now to start finding these kind of markets, to start pinpointing where they might be and start analyzing, looking at the cycle, the momentum cycle, as well as the thing that's happening inside the momentum cycle to actually trade it. But the main thing I want you to take from this advanced cycle right here, the cycle advanced, is that you learn the momentum cycle, you learn what it does and how to generally label it. We're going to talk about labeling down the line as well, but you've already learned how to do that. And you've also learned how those same moves, because of fractals, like I've said, are represented on a lower, but are viewed through that cycle frame. And just this cycle delivery here of an entry time frame is actually only this amount of a potential delivery, which is why you see me following these things as they deliver through every MMB until I hopefully get to 3 or 4. And then I expect to just manage the rest of my position, close the rest of my position, let it go crazy, or for it to break down and reset up later for new opportunities down the line. So again, this right here, as clean a shot as I can, this right there, basically up to there. And now I'll zoom in from exactly, there we go, from exactly here, basically from this major flush to here. Let me delete this. From exactly this major flush here to this exact moment here is the same representation as this entry cycle right here in terms of where it is, in terms of the MMB1, MMB2. Now, it's not exactly perfect with the exact flush outs, the exact areas that come to these exact moments, because that's not how flush outs work. That's not how the market works. That's not how orders work. But you have the characteristics of what to expect out of orders as they deliver, out of momentum MBs as they start to form on a higher time frame, what that means for the lower, what that means across the board, what that means for how it should come in and how it should deliver. And now you have that better understanding of fractals. And this is that market I traded, right? Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And you can find this on many things. You know, you can go back to, if you're watching this in 2040, maybe 20 years from now, because you've decided that, hey, AI is taking over everything, but trading is something that I can still pull EV out of and edge out of because all the moves are still the same from 1970, 1940, 1930. You can go and find some of the stuff on this list even right now in 1129 and go and take a look at how these things delivered over the last few years even. It's the same thing on repeat. Go and look at that Tesla move we spoke about. Look at that GBTC. Look at Bitcoin USD. Look at MSTR. Look at these moments. Study them again. It's the same exact move. These are your cycle advanced. There it is, which will now input us back into entry advanced to really understand what some entries can actually end up looking like. But there it is. You have a better shot of the momentum cycle and the understanding of it and some of the labeling, because we're going to do labeling down the line. You kind of saw a little bit of that already. You also have the understanding of the entry cycle and the true fractality of price and how this thing right here actually represents this right here. It actually represents, let me show you even better. Let's get that purple out. It actually represents like that right there, right? Even though, remember, from the screenshot, we have something like this, right? This is this. You've learned that fractal, and you know that the way that oftentimes prices go, the real way that this plays out because of where we were, which was right here, is right, it moves higher, flushes out again, but doesn't come back, moves higher, flushes out again, but doesn't come back, moves higher, way higher, right? So what's really happened from this market from there on out, if I had to draw it in, right, if I'm using the actual momentum cycle that happened, is we're at that MMB2 right here, actually. So price moves higher, then flushes out as a deeper flush, but never comes back here. Then builds up the MBs, goes even higher, then flushes, goes even higher, then flushes out to here without ever coming back. So flushes out to like here without ever coming back. Then from there builds those accumulation MBs, starts a move, maybe starts momentum MBs here, flushes back down, probably under the 10 and 20 right here, right? Flushes back down. So maybe it takes out your position here or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, great, your position behind it. Then starts an even higher move, right? Starts that higher move up, right? So maybe it goes like through that accumulation MBs, maybe momentum MB goes higher for that move. Then creates another flush move, but never comes back to even this point. So another goes higher, goes through another flush move, right? Doesn't come back to any of that, starts building MBs, moves higher, and then starts to, moves even higher, right? And then starts to chop around later on. So starts to chop around. So now you have a real demonstration of what the entry cycle is going to look like. And that's, guess what? Let me zoom out. That's exactly what you see here. There it is. That's this cycle represented. That's this entire momentum cycle on the V drawn out entirely right here on the E. That's your E cycle. And notice how many opportunities truly get presented to you, which should start to completely eliminate your FOMO, because FOMO, you're at MenthFX. We don't have FOMO. We don't think about that. It's just useless. That's a thing for the stuff you studied over the last 5 years, or have heard online on Twitter or YouTube or Instagram, and it's completely useless because, well, you are learning fundamentally how markets move, how they do this for years on end, for decades on end, across every single market, across multiple timeframes, across clear markets, and how many opportunities are created. Opportunities, maybe opportunities, I don't know, probably not. Opportunities, and then it's extended. And that's in one market, one market that I've studied, that I personally traded over the last 2-3 months. How many markets do you think there are? Plenty. You just be patient for the cycle to play out for your move and trade the cycle on clear markets. So I have fixed you. Together we are fixed. And you are going to get even better at everything that we're doing right now. Everything that you're learning, everything that you're doing, you're going to get even better at it, and you're going to have tools that make it even better for you. Like the screener, which is one of the areas where I found MSTR. Here it is. Had really good readings. I followed it. Now it's breaking down. That's why some of this is red, but that's why I followed it. Some other trades I traded like over recent is what? Coin, I traded this thing. Now again, it's kind of coming down, but that's okay. GME, this thing was crazy. Palantir. Again, these are all stocks right now because we haven't added crypto, futures, or anything else yet, but it's all going to be here because you have access to it. Tesla, this is something I just traded today. Today is still Friday, 10 p.m. I traded this today. Look at what it looks like, right? Green across the board. This is something I traded. So you're going to be able to not only put to use the things you're already learning, the advanced versions of it, and understanding how those fractals look and how to label and how to actually analyze something, but you're also going to have the ability to make it even more efficient. And you won't have any FOMO issue to come with it because you start to understand what an actual move, right, looks like. right? You actually understand how many true opportunities you have behind any given move. That's a cycle advanced. Hope you enjoyed it.